Hey everyone, I know you love my video vlogs because I'm honest and I make it real, and I tell you how I think it is, at least according to my beliefs. So this particular video, I'm going to show you one change that you can make, just one shift, and it's going to dramatically increase your personal freedom, your state of independence, decrease your dependency, and it's going to dramatically reduce the stress in your life while upping the peace in your life and the tranquility that you feel. And I'm living it firsthand. I'm helping other people live it, so I have no doubt that if you want to, I can probably help you too. So let's get on with it. And if you're a first-time viewer, of my video vlogs, like you witnessed just now where I got tongue-tied, these are pretty much unedited except for some text I leave at the end usually. And I hope you enjoy it and you come back and you keep looking for more. So let's get on with it. Okay, here's the one shift that you're going to make. And I've got a few different color markers to outline it for you. But right off the bat, first color, red, because this is a no-no in my book. But these are basically representations of your cash flow and the direction of your cash flow. So in a sentence, you change the direction of your cash flow, you can go from poor to rich, from rich to poor, from middle to either direction, it doesn't matter. You just switch the direction of your cash flow. And if you have no cash, no job, no income, well, there's good news for you too, because I personally raised money from absolutely nothing, and I didn't get the memo that you need money to make money, thank goodness, because I started making money with absolutely nothing. So if you have no cash flow, there's very good news for you as well. So please stick around and check this out. But the first direction of cash flow I want to show you that's a no-no in my book is this one. And my marker doesn't work. Alright, I have no red, so I had to edit that out because it took me a few minutes to figure that out. But anyway, here we go. I've got black instead. So here's the first no-no in cash flow direction. So I stands for income, E stands for expense, L stands for liability, and A stands for asset, so you know. So here's the first example. You got cash flow, it's going in, your income is your job, your expenses, and it's moving in the direction of income's money, out goes money. So you're spending what you're making, and these are people that don't have any assets whatsoever. That's why this line didn't go down here in either assets or liabilities. So if you have a cash flow direction that looks like that, it means that you're living paycheck to paycheck. It means that you might make a lot, you might make a little, but you're spending everything that you earn. So either way you're poor. If you're making a little or you're making a lot, it doesn't matter. But you also own nothing and you have nothing, and you're also just one emergency or one paycheck away from being in a complete financial disaster because you have absolutely no cushion. So this is the most vulnerable place to be as far as cash flow goes, and as far as your personal life goes too, for that matter. So that's why I consider that the first absolute no-no in cash flow direction. So that's the first example. The second example is this, and this one is going to be probably more common, and that's as follows. So you got your income coming in from your job, you have your expenses, and your expenses go into liabilities, and then it just sort of stays there. So these are people who are keeping up with the Joneses. They've got these material possessions, big house, nice car, they have no assets that are making them any money. They might have a savings account, probably not, because a savings account really isn't an asset either. But that's how a lot of people are living. And with something like that, with either of these two cash flows, you are working hard for money. And the problem with working hard for money is that the harder that you work for money, the more you're going to be penalized through taxes. You're going to pay more and more in taxes. You'll get in higher tax brackets. So there's no financial incentive to work hard for money and to make more money, because you're just going to lose more of it to the government. And also the other thing, when you're working hard for money, in my opinion, this is a bigger deal actually than the first thing that I just gave you, but when you're working hard for money, you are enslaved to money. In other words, if you stop working or if you lose your job, you don't get any more money, and then you can't pay the bills, you can't fund your liabilities anymore, so you lose all your material possessions because the banks come and take them back from you. So there's no security at all, or freedom or independence in living like this with this direction of cash flow, and it's the most common one in this country. And then there's a third direction, which is kind of common too, and that's this. So you got your income, expenses go into your liabilities, and your liabilities go back up into your expenses, and out it goes, and everything is gone. So that could be, say you got a house, it burns down, you had no insurance on it, so your liability is completely gone, it's wiped out. It's also the lotto mentality. People that spend money on lottery tickets, and it's gone, it's just an expense, it's completely gone. $5 a week adds up on those lottery tickets, or whatever it is that you're spending. It's all gone. You have nothing to show for it. At least with the liability, you got something to show for it, even if it might only be temporary, I don't know. But living this way is the lotto mentality. It's the poor person mentality. And you're still working for money, which means you're enslaved to money. And you know you're enslaved to money when you know that if you stop working, you stop getting paid. If something happens to your job and it's gone, you stop getting paid. So you're trading your time for money. You're working for money. You're being penalized by the taxes for it, and you have no control over it whatsoever because somebody else owns your job and they own your income. So it's a very dangerous place to be. All these three cash flow directions over here are extremely vulnerable. Your risk is sky high. And what does risk mean? Risk means you have no control. So because you don't own your job and your income, you have no control over it. Your employer does. And a lot of times we're seeing things like mergers and acquisitions where a company buys your company, they decide they no longer need you, and it didn't matter if you did a great job and you got merit increases and this and that. It no longer matters if you loved your job, it's gone. So that's what I mean by there's no freedom over here, there's only vulnerability, and there's only one big fat honkin' stinking gamble that you're playing with your livelihood and your family's livelihood. So that's why it's no good in my opinion. And there's a lot of people that's going to argue with me on this, and they'll say, but Tom, I love my job, I'm totally free, I'm independent. If that were true, then you could have the option that you may not want to take because you love your job, but you could have the option of leaving it, or you can have the option of losing it at no fault of your own, and you're going to be fine because you got this other income that's taking care of you. But most people don't have that. I would argue you should love your job, and you should be prideful in your job. You should love your job. You should always do more than you get paid to do because you're more likely to get a pay increase and things like that if you want it. But don't confuse loving your job for freedom, because you're not free if you have any one of these directional cash flows. And if a job is all that you have, then you're in one of these three cash flow directions, and you have no freedom, and you don't own your money, you don't own your job, you have zero control, which means that you have the most risk, and that's a gamble that you're playing with your lifestyle and the livelihood of your family. So you should know that for what it is. And I'm not saying any of this to be right, and I don't need you to feel wrong, but I know a lot of people that disagree with me on this, and I also know a lot of them that have lost their jobs, and now they're stressed out to here because they have no idea what they're going to do to feed themselves or take care of their families because their job is gone at no fault of their own. And they might have loved it, but it didn't matter. That job is still gone. So, I only know one person, I was trying to think of this today, one person who actually loves their job and has their freedom. Everyone else either loves their job or they have freedom, but they don't have both. But one person I know does. And that's only because he built up this residual passive income on the side, and now that passive income is so big, this income that he owns, that he no longer needs to have a job. It's all optional. In other words, his passive income totally pays for all of his expenses, his family's expenses, and even by now it's actually in multiplication tables higher than what he makes at his job. I asked him why he still has his job, because most people would leave their job. That he said, I want to be the example to other people who believe they can't do what I'm doing just because they have a family and a full-time job. Bam! I mean, how cool is that? I'm not even willing to do that, and I feel like I've got an enormous charity of heart. So that's pretty awesome, and I'm glad that he is doing that so that I can at least tell his story to inspire some of you. So moving right on, here's the shift that you eventually want to start making, okay? I'm going to do this one in blue because this is starting to get a little bit happier. But you've got your income and expenses, your assets and your liabilities. So here we start with your income because you still have a job. Go down to your expenses, goes into some liabilities, but here's the thing you've got to start doing. You've got to start to divert some of your assets immediately. I'm sorry, your cash flow. You've got to start immediately diverting at least a portion of your cash flow immediately into some assets so that it's not all being spent and all going to liabilities. Some of it has to start going into your assets. But it can't just be, any asset. And in my definition, so this would be any asset, which is also Robert Kiyosaki's definition, is an asset is something that puts money into your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. So we've got the asset, and because it's putting money into your pocket, so that's what makes it an asset, it starts to fund your income. So you're not only making money from a job, but now you've got this asset that you're starting to invest in, and it's producing cash, so that's funding your income too. And let me make something really clear for you guys. There is no way you are ever going to be independent. There's no way you're going to decrease your vulnerability if you don't start diverting some of your money into an asset that's going to put cash into your pocket in the form of a passive income. There is no way you will achieve your independence if you don't start doing that. And you start small, and you're faithful with the little things, and you're going to be made ruler of much later. It's just a general law of prosperity, and it's absolutely true. So you can do this outside of your job and outside of family and all these other things you've got going on. You can start doing this and just start small. And then eventually you'll have the option of leaving your job, because eventually this income here, this asset that's pouring money back into your income, is going to eventually entirely pay for all of your expenses, your family's expenses, and it's eventually going to replace the income of your job, in which case you can leave your job if you want to. And at that moment, when you've got this passive thing over here that's funding your income and your entire lifestyle, your expenses is paid for, at that moment, that is the threshold when you actually become independent and you become free. You lower the stress in your life, increase the peace in your life, and that's when all those kinds of things start to happen. And then you can continue to build on this so that you can make as much money as you want. And I want you to know, it's not about the money. If only you had more money in the form of a passive income from an asset that you worked hard to build, if only you had more of that, then if something happens to your job, you're going to be fine and your family's going to be fine. If only you had more money from a passive income from an asset that you worked hard to build, if only you had that, you'd be able to afford to keep your parents in their home, pay for home health care so that they don't have to rot to death in the sunset years of their lives in an old folks' home. If you had more of this and you spent less of your time just throwing your money away, but you actually put it into an asset that was funding your income, you'd be able to put your kids through college so that they could start day one in the real world without 6 figures on their back worth of debt that they would probably never ever pay off because it's so crushing. It takes money to do those things. So it's not about the money. So the last thing I want you to send me is some email about, Tom, it doesn't make money to make me free and happy and all that stuff, because it takes money to do these things. That's just the reality of it. That's the currency that we trade on, is money. Without it, you're going to be poor in the streets. You're not going to be able to provide for your family the way that you want to. Your kids are going to maybe not go to school. If they do go to school, they'll start the real world with 6 figures of debt on their back. They'll probably never pay off. If your heart bleeds to give more to a charity, you got to have more money. So here's where you ultimately want to be, in my opinion, and I'm going to use green for this. This is the transitional phase right here. But check this out. This is where you eventually want to be. Your cash flow is going to start with your assets because you don't have a job anymore, because you don't need one. And that's simply going to fund your income, right? It's a pretty cool thing. So, I want all you givers out there who are primarily motivated by giving back to others, I want you to understand something, because this here freaks you out, most of you. You're more likely to do something like this over here, where you're giving everything that you're making. If you don't pay yourself first, and learn to be a great investor in assets that will pay you passively and very handsomely passively over time, then you will never ever reach your full potential, or not even close to your potential, of how much you could have given back and helped your causes otherwise. So if you get to this point here, even this point as you transition and then you ultimately get to this point, you are going to have exponentially as much to give back, because you're going to have exponentially as much more than if you keep spending everything that you make and just giving, 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 giving. So if your primary motivator is to give back more, you're going to have more to give back if you make it over here. And guess what? Because this is a passive income and an asset that you built and you own, after you pass on, this is still going to continue to pay out. It doesn't stop. It's not like with a job, you got this high-paying job, when you pass on, it's over. Nobody gets that. You can't leave it behind for your kids, your family, or a charity to inherit it. It's over. This you own. You leave it behind to your family, your kids, your favorite charity, a cause, and it could be millions, it could be billions of dollars. And it could be there for generations and generations to come, long after your passing. So if you really truly want to give back as much as you can, you cannot stay here. You have to move over here. You have to stop spending what you're making, even if it's in the form of giving back. You cannot do that. You can follow the general rule of skimming 10% off the gross top and giving back as you're moving along, but don't do any more than 10%, at least not until you're over here, because once you're over here, I'm telling you, that is the key. That's the whole key, the whole ticket in all of this, so that you can give back more, or you can keep it to yourself, or whatever that you want to do. This is just how you're going to have more. But and then going back to the transitional period and the theme of this video, and gaining your freedom and your independence and being less vulnerable and reducing all the stress and chaos with peace and tranquility, that's not going to happen until you at least cover your living expenses, every penny of it. And the only way you can do that is to start diverting some of your money into building an asset that's going to pay you passively. And I want to send this out to you guys, because this is going to be the most difficult part, is just beginning to make that transition. I know you will clutch on to that money with your hands, and you won't want to let it go. And you might put it into a savings account, and you might think that you're doing the smart thing, but your savings account is losing money, it's losing buying power. Your savings account is a liability, it's not an asset. Your house that you have a mortgage on is not a liability, it's an asset. Is your house taking money out of your pocket every month, or is it putting money in your pocket? Obviously, it's taking money out of your pocket. It's your house. I hate to break it to you, but your house is totally a liability for you. Now, to your bank, it's an asset. So it's not that your bank lied to you and said that your house is an asset. They just didn't tell you that it's their asset and your liability. So if you look at a balance sheet, I'm going to show you this. Check this out. This is going to be in black for a reason. But let's say this is, we'll do this side. Okay, so this dollar sign that I'm sort of drawing, that represents your house, and it's in the liability side of your balance sheet. And then we have a really bad drawing of the bank's balance sheet. So this is your balance sheet, this is the bank's balance sheet. Same, left side is assets, left side is assets, right side is liability. So your, another dollar sign. Hopefully you can see that. But your liability is their asset, and their asset is your liability, and that's your house. And that's how they balance out. Every asset has to have a liability and vice versa, and that's the fundamentals of how a balance sheet works. So your savings account is a liability. Your house is a liability, but it's your bank's asset. So I want to make sure we're clear on that, because a lot of people confuse liabilities for assets. A lot of people do. So if you start funding, I don't know, you start putting more money into your house and into your savings accounts, thinking that those are assets that are going to put money in your pocket, then you're totally going down the wrong path, and this will not work, and you'll never get ahead. So that's not what I'm talking about at all. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket and eventually will do it passively, so that you no longer have to work for money. So when you work for money, you can't stop working. A lot of my self-employed friends, I love them. That's awesome that they have the entrepreneurial spirit, but they're also working for money because they can't ever leave their work, because if they do, they don't get paid. So, that's a big problem. And if they leave it to somebody else, it might not be the same, and that could cost them a lot of money. So most self-employed people are also working for money, and they're enslaved by their work because they can't ever leave their work, otherwise they don't get paid. Much like the way that an employee can't leave their work or their job or they don't get paid. So in my opinion, that is not freedom, it's not independence, it's a huge vulnerability. A lot of self-employed people live it too. So here's the deal. You have to start putting money into an asset that is going to pay you passively if you want to be a free, independent person, period. Otherwise, your work owns you, and you know your work owns you if you cannot leave your work and still get paid, period. So that's why you have to make this transition from here to here in your spare time outside of everything else you got going on, and ultimately over here. And then at that point, you can work for money if you want to. You can have a job because you love your job. And if something happens to your job, you're still going to be okay because you've made it over here. It's all good. And it's your freedom. It's the bread and butter of your family. It's everything you want it to be. It's your life insurance. It's your health insurance. It's your security. It's everything that you want it to be. It's all right here. Period. That's why I can't talk enough about it. And I know that for most of you out there, it's going to be really hard to make that first step, that transitional period of going to here, so that you can make it over here. But you must, because if you don't, you stay here and you live and you die broke and poor and vulnerable and stressed out, and you're not a free person. So you must start doing that. And you must understand why it's so important. And when you do, and you increase your financial education and your personal growth and development along the process, then you're absolutely going to guarantee yourself that you're going to make this work. The only reason that anybody would ever say that this transition becomes risky is because they are a risky person. It's not that this is risky, not at all. It's because they are risky, because they don't develop themselves personally and get financially educated and things like that. So start making that transition. I started in the year 2007. It took me 2.5 years. Some people do it much quicker, some people take a little bit longer. But when you measure that against the rest of your life, it's not a long period of time. It's worth it. It is so worth it. And then when you start thinking in terms of something bigger than yourself and beyond yourself, something you can leave behind for other people or a charity or your family, or if you're involved in something that is that you know is going to have far-reaching implications and positive effects and things like that, that are just way beyond your scope, then you might be motivated to do it more. I know I am, for sure, when I know that I'm affecting thousands and thousands of people, and eventually, someday I'm sure that what I'm doing is going to affect millions of people. That really lights me up and motivates me, because it's not all about me. It's about a lot of other people too that I'm directly and indirectly helping out in some positive manner. And that's a good thing. My belief in general is that the best way to achieve your dreams is by helping enough other people achieve their dreams that you actually begin achieving yours. And that's a big part of this model here. Transitioning from this to that to over here. Huge difference. So instead of working for money, when you start to make this transition right here, this should motivate you to start doing it. But as soon as you start to make those first steps, you're transitioning over here where you're taking at least a portion of your income and you're putting it into an asset that's going to produce cash flow that funds your income passively. Once you start doing that, you are no longer only working for money. You are starting to transition into a free, independent individual who's less vulnerable, and replacing some of that stress and chaos with some peace and tranquility, because you're no longer working for money. If you're working for money, you will never ever get out of the rat race, you'll never be free, and you'll never get debtors off your back and all these other things. It's horrible to live that way, in my belief. So you have to start making that transition. So instead of working for money, what are you working for? You're working to build an asset that's going to eventually pay you passively, whether you work or you don't work. That's your freedom. That's your means to afford your expenses, to nourish yourself, your family, your livelihood, your lifestyle, however big or small you want it to be, however modest, or it doesn't matter, however much you want to give back, it doesn't matter. It's all about the freedom, what you want to do with your life, and how you want to give back and help other people, and how you want to help your family. That's what all this is about. If you're down here and you stay there, then you really don't have any options, man, except to make the transition to here and to there. So if you want to talk more about that with me, I love, one of my biggest passions is to help people transition over here, because I know that's where your freedoms are, and that's also where your dreams are. And I want to connect you to reality, because I alluded to this earlier, but a lot of people will argue this whole concept. And I've seen a lot of those same people argue this concept. They lose their job at no fault of their own. And now suddenly, they're so stressed out, they don't know what to do. I mean, they're looking at possibly losing everything they have or they think they have. Some of them have kids, a lot of them have kids, and they're not sure what they're going to do to support their kids anymore. I know some adults that don't even eat anymore, practically, because it's either the kids eat or they eat instead of the whole family eats. And how sad is that? There is no need for that. There is none. If you live in the United States of America and you're over 21 years old, there is no need to live that way. And if you're already there, there's no need to stay there. You can come out. Got to make this transition. If you have no money whatsoever and no income like I did when I first got started, so I've been there, I can empathize, that is no reason to stay there. That is no reason whatsoever to start thinking and using money differently, even if you don't have any right now. I got started with no money and no income. There's infinite ways to raise money from absolutely nothing. Whoever sold you the lie that it takes money to need money, don't listen to it. Thankfully, when I got that memo, I shredded it up. I just got rid of it. I burned it. And there's other people that have too, that started with absolutely nothing. And there's some people that started with less than nothing, say $1 million worth of debt, and having no income and no money. I mean, imagine that. And they go on to make millions and billions, and it's not about the money. I told you earlier what the money means. It means your college education, it means your peace, it means your parents have a wonderful, desirable place to spend the sunset years of their life. It means the freedom to not have to work for money any longer, because it's not about money. It's about being free and independent and living your dreams and helping others live their dreams too. So get a hold of me if you have some questions and you want to talk about this. And I'm sure that I can help you out. And if you need some advice on what to do if you have no money, I'm sure I can help you out. If you need some help taking these first steps to go from here to here, I know that I can help you out. This is the one change. It's the only change that you really need to make a drastic difference in your life and move from being in a state of dependency to independence. If you have a job and only a job, you're not independent. You don't own your income or your job, someone else does, and you have no control variables whatsoever, which means that you're in the riskiest position that anybody could ever possibly be in, and the harder that you work, the more you're going to be penalized for it through the tax system. And we can complain about that, say whether it's fair or not fair, and there's nothing we can do to change it. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That's how you shape your life. You put your energy there instead of putting your energy that takes you off the field to make any change for you. So take that to heart and start making this transition, and don't do it on your own. You need help. I needed help. I couldn't have done it by myself. I tried it first, and I prolonged it because I tried to at first. So don't do it on your own. And I hope that for many of you, I've sort of reconnected you to reality, because I know a lot of people are totally disconnected from reality. They think they're living in freedom when they're really not, and people think they own assets when really they own liabilities that's sucking the life out of them. So I hope I've connected you to reality, and I hope you start making this shift, and I hope you reach out for help. If not me, then from somebody. I get most of my financial education from the Rich Dad Poor Dad company, so I highly recommend them. They're awesome. I'm putting what I've learned to practice, and I'm living it. I'm a true testament, and there's many others that are too. And it's completely wonderful.